brothers Judica Cordiglia and Bird. As early as 949, the brothers Archie, 16 years old, and Giovanni Battista, only 10 years old, began to be interested in radio technology. They got the inspiration for this hobby from a present from a friend of the family. At that time, they lived in a small town of R.I.P, near Lake Como in Italy. One day, when the US occupation army sold superfluous radio equipment at a flea market price, the Judica Cordiglia Brothers assembled their first radio system in the attic of their parents' house. Step by step, they expanded their radio system with several receivers in order to be able to hear more than just one frequency at the same time by purchasing devices from a second or third hand. The Judica Cordiglia brothers built antennas themselves to save money from the very beginning. Eventually, they became fascinated by the satellite age and decided to become a part of it. At that time, they decided to concentrate more on Soviet space travel because the Soviet Union was closer to Italy, and unlike the USA, they generally published very few details about their space program. In addition, the Soviet Union had not given any precise information about its upcoming launches, and they only reported about them when the mission was already in full swing. The first success of the Judica Cordiglia brothers was the reception of the Sputnik 1, who was the first artificial satellite sent in October 957. After hours of waiting in front of the recipient, it continued in November 957, when Sputnik 2 and the first living creature in the world, the dog Laika, were able to hear not only the measured belly transmission from the satellite, but also the heart rate on a different frequency. In the years that followed, the Judica Cordiglia brothers listened to and recorded everything that had successfully made it into orbit on Soviet and American satellites. In 959, the entire family moved to the big city in Turin. There they lived in a 6-story skyscraper in Via dell'Accademia Albertina 3, near the famous Mall Antonelliana. Viewed on Google Maps on the roof terrace of the highest block of flats in downtown Turin, the Judica Cordiglia brothers built their antenna system, which grew in size over time. In order to escape the disturbing fog of the big city and to have more space for the expansion of the satellite observation station, the Judica Cordiglia brothers decided to build their radio system outside the big city in the 60s. For this purpose, they decided to use a disused bunker on the Casina Verde Hill, east of Turin. Viewed on Google Maps at this time, the name of the satellite observation station, Torre Verde, located in 10133 Torino TO, Italia, was born. It is made up of torre, which means something like tower, and verde, which is derived from the name of the place. Since the Judica Cordiglia brothers have always been great thinkers, they also built a movable reflector with a diameter of approximately 12 meters and a weight of a half of ton, from pipes for a frame and a truck frame as a bracket from the scrapyard. A vertically polarized phase array dipole row was mounted in it. With this antenna, they were able to receive the historical radio messages from Yuri Gagarin. During his space flight with Vostok 1 in April of the 961. Today, there is a suspicion that Yuri Gagarin was not on board the spaceship at all. The radio messages that were spoken were kept very general and sometimes described incorrect details of the flight. It is therefore assumed that they were tapped on the ground before the flight moved to the Villa Bertalozon. Just a year later, the family decided to move away from Turin to a better place of residence. In 960, the company moved to the small village of San Mauricio Canavese, about 20 kilometers from Turin, to the Villa Bertalozon. From the 16th century, as the Torre Verde satellite observation station, the one found even more space for the radio system in order to expand it further, as the Thunderbird satellite observation station became more and more complex. The Judica Cordiglia Brothers needed help with the task. For this purpose, they trained 15 space enthusiasts, most of who were in their late 20s, to work on the satellite observation station. From then on, we worked in 12-hour shifts with 2 groups of 5 people each. This consisted of 2 people who operated the receivers and made tape recordings, 2 people who were responsible for the antenna tracking, and 1 person who operated the calculator to calculate the following overflights. The entire Judica Cordiglia family was also involved in the subject at the time. The younger sister, Maria Theresia, learned the Russian language, especially to be able to translate the radio messages from the Soviet space travelers. The father, a professor of forensic medicine and an expert in forensic medicine, helped with his medical knowledge, while the mother had deciphered secret codes of the Soviets. Next, the Judica Cordiglia Brothers wanted to organize coverage of the entire Earth with the help of other participation observation stations. The then fiancé of Giovanni Bautista and today's wife Laura Forbato coordinated the so-called SEUS network between 65 and 66 around the 17 observation stations that stretched from the Tahiti in the Pacific to Angola in Africa to Argentina in the South America. We're connected with the help of shortwave radio. In addition, a mobile observation station with easy to transport receiving antennas was set up, which could be transported with a tiny Fiat 600 belonging to the family. At that time, the Judica Cordiglia Brothers wanted to locate the locations of the Soviet control stations, which could only be achieved with a cross-bearing between 2 observation stations. Reception of Phantom Cosmonauts. The Judica Cordiglia Brothers only became really famous when they received sensational radio messages and signals from several Soviet Phantom Cosmonauts between the 60s and 64. The constant monitoring of all the usual frequencies used by Soviet space travel brought impressive traces to light. According to the information provided by the Judica Cordiglia Brothers, there are said to have been more than 7 unfortunate Phantom Cosmonauts, all of whom are said to have received the last words of desperation. The interest of the international press in the early 60s was very high on the subject of manned space travel. Many of the journalists went in and out of the satellite observation stations of the time to get the latest news from independent sources about red space travel. November 28 to 30. 960. A Morse message in English with the content SOS in the whole world. The message could be received repeatedly until November 13th, 960. A Doppler shift was found on the signal, which indicated an object moving away. The signals could include can also be received by the observatory in Bochum. Through February of 961, received of a biomedical signal, a pulse, heartbeat, and labored breathing of a seemingly dying phantom cosmonaut could be heard. It was later announced that on 2 February of the 961, an unknown spaceman who said to have carried out a secret space flight who passed out during the flight and lost his life in the process. On the 2nd day of flight in the 7th orbit, the spacecraft was apparently automatically emergency landed on foreign soil. There are some doubts as to the authenticity of this received biomedical signal, as the Thunderbird satellite observation station was the only one that received it. The body functions of the space travelers, such as heartbeat, breathing, blood, pressures, and electrocardiograms were never sent via an audio channel, but always converted into electrical signals by the sensors and sent to the ground as measured value transmission. The biomedical values were measured via a transmitter called signal, aerial side A. In other cases, we have phantom cosmonauts, are subjects of a conspiracy theory, alleging that Soviet cosmonauts went to outer space before Yuri Gagarin, but their existence has never been published, acknowledged by either the Soviet or Russian space authorities. Proponents of the lost cosmonauts theory argue that the Soviet Union attempted to launch 2 or more human space flights before Gagarin's, and that at least 2 cosmonauts died in 2 attempts. Another cosmonaut, Vladimir, is believed to have landed off course and been held by the Chinese government. The government of the Soviet Union supposedly suppressed this information to prevent bad publicity during the height of the Cold War. The evidence cited to support lost cosmonaut theories is generally regarded as inconclusive, and several cases have been confirmed as hoaxes. In the 80s, American journalist James Ober researched space-related disasters in the Soviet Union, but found no evidence of these lost cosmonauts. Since the fall of the Soviet Union in the early 90s, much previously restricted information has been made available, including the information of Valentin Bondarenko, a would-be cosmonaut, whose death during the training on Earth was covered up by the Soviet government. May 1623, in the 961, a secret space flight with a female cosmonaut on board named Ludmila Serakovna, who was apparently in a dramatic situation, and the mission had a catastrophic outcome. The signals were also received at observation stations in Alaska and Sweden. This is the recording of a Soviet space flight in November of the 63. In it, a Russian woman can be heard complaining about the increasing temperature inside the craft before it is destroyed and the re-entry. This was recorded by Judica Cordiglia Brothers in the 63. It is reportedly one of the many transmissions intercepted by the two brothers that prove the existence of the lost cosmonauts. By the way, Space Oddity is a song written and recorded by English singer-songwriter David Bowie. It was first released as a 7-inch single on 11 July of the '69 before appearing as the opening track of his second studio album, David Bowie. It became one of Bowie's signature songs and one of 4 of his songs to be included in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame's 500 songs that shaped rock and roll. The lyrics describe the fictional Major Tom who blasts off into space, but then loses connection with ground control and gets lost. October 14, 1961, a Russian-speaking male voice which suddenly disappeared. A short time later, the US military reported that a Soviet spaceship with a crew of 3 cosmonauts had been lost. The broadcast could also be heard in observation stations in Tokyo, Dakar, Sydney, and the observatory in Bochum. The Japanese Institute for Research in Tokyo said the spaceship had been blown into space. Unfortunately, with this sensational radio message, precise data such as time or reception frequencies were rarely given by the Judica Cordiglia Brothers. Therefore, there are some experts who strongly doubt the authenticity of the radio message allegedly received by the Judica Cordiglia Brothers, then and still today. One thing is clear, however, the Judica Cordiglia Brothers were skillful enough and had the necessary equipment to be able to track down such radio messages. At that time, the Soviet Union only reported publicly about its space flights, even if there was also the certainty of a successful conclusion. If a mission had failed, the public would never have been informed. So who can say exactly how many of these failures have occurred? The Soviet Union always wanted to tell a perfect story about heroes who have completed a smooth space flight where everything went as planned and without problems. It appears that the Soviet Union had too many space programs in the early 60s. An outwardly public one that was directed by Sergei Korolev and a secret black, where apparently suicidal missions have been carried out that have rarely ended with success. Finally, observation and closure. Probably one of the last comprehensive observations by the Tory Bird satellite observation station was the unfortunate flight of the Soyuz 1 spacecraft in April of the 1967. Cosmonaut Vladimir Komarov, who had already successfully completed a one-day space flight with Vostochny 1 in October of the '64, was allowed to use this new prototype from a spaceship to conduct the first manned test flight. The first problem arose shortly after reaching orbit. The mission could not be carried out as planned. After 18 orbits, the landing was initiated prematurely, where there was a serious accident. Since the main parachute could not be deployed, the capsule hit the ground almost unchecked, and the cosmonaut Vladimir Komarov lost his life. According to the information on Wikipedia, Soyuz 1, the short-wave transmitter from Soyuz 1, should not have worked properly. This means that secure communication was only possible via VHF and directly over Soviet territory, and the Ostlander, as well as the observatory in Bochum, could e.g. before the radio blackout until the 4:15 a.m. CAT, only 9 minutes before the hard landing at 20:008 kHz in AM last radio message, "Everything is okay, I feel good," received by Vladimir Komarov. Interesting is the apparently contradicting representation of the brothers Judica Cordiglia, which was printed in the daily newspaper in April 25 of the 1967. Vladimir Komarov becoming officially the first human to die in a space flight. Imagine being lost in the middle of the space, looking for the last time to your spacecraft and to the Earth, and looking now to the infinite darkness in the middle of the space, who are not sounds, not feelings, the temperature getting more and more cold, with the last memories of your family, friends, and all the things who you have lived in the earth, just waiting the last minutes of oxygen in your equipment, losing slowly your breath. Thanks for watching.